I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this is a first deal episode where we walk through what it takes for someone to find, fund, and close on their first apartment complex. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you are probably trying to do exactly the same thing. So before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and the little notification bell to make sure you get notified every single time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. What advice would you give an aspiring investor who's about a year behind you?
I think it's kind of eat the elephant in bite-sized pieces. When you're starting out in multifamily, at least for me, it seemed very intimidating. It seemed like a very far goal and maybe something that we were never even going to accomplish. But when you break it down into the components and then just kind of tackle them one at a time, it suddenly becomes a very doable goal over time. So what do you need to get your first deal done? Well, you need a deal. You need investors. You probably need some amount of personal money. Break each one of those items down.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Very excited for today's show. It's one of our first deal episodes, although it's not this couple's first deal. I'm also super excited because I've known these guys for quite a while. They've both been on the podcast as aspiring investors, and they have done a couple of deals since, and we're going to talk about one of them. So Jonathan and Paula Nichols, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Brian, thanks for having us. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so this is a lot of fun, and I got to say my favorite episodes are always bringing one of the aspiring investors back and talking about deals, because you get to see a lot of the differences. But so before we kick into the actual deal itself, let's talk about you guys. So go ahead and give us an idea of your background. Tell us where you're from, who you are, and help us get to know you.
Jonathan and Paula Nichols. We live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We've been married for almost 5 years now. And our story in real estate is that a few months after getting married, Paula informed me one day that we needed to find a hobby together. And so I said, a hobby? Why do we need to do that? And we kind of went back and forth on what that could possibly be, but didn't really come to any conclusions. Well, one day, a couple more months down the road, I stumbled across a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And through reading that book, like a lot of people, realized the value and opportunities that were available with real estate investing. And so, I kind of mentioned to Paula, it was something that looked interesting. And she said, yeah, I think I'd be interested in kind of learning more about that too. So from there, we dived in, began to learn about real estate investing. And long story short, over the next couple of years, bought a number of different residential properties across the Arlington, Texas area and converted them into short-term rentals. But what we realized after doing that for a couple of years is that it wasn't really long-term scalable. And so, like a lot of your listeners probably know, that's how we became interested in multifamily. We knew a number of people through our meetups and books and things like that who did multifamily. And so we began to learn about multifamily. And we eventually wound up joining the Michael Blanc program. I'm sure you're familiar with that, Brian. So went through his program, and with a little bit of time and some networking, we're able to co-GP on a deal, and then JV on a deal, and then eventually be the lead syndicators on a deal. So that's our real estate story. I'll let Paula maybe fill in some more of the details about the rest of our background.
Yeah, I think that a big catalyst in that journey of real estate has been Jonathan's background is in aerospace engineering, and my background is in finance and management consulting. And so we had very busy, W-2 jobs, and we're very much of achievers, worked really, really hard to get there, but we couldn't really see all the effort that we were putting was not being paid off as fast as we were wanting. And so what enticed us about the real estate industry and us being entrepreneurs was to be able to really kind of receive and move at the pace that we wanted to move, which was pretty fast. And so I think that was a big trigger for us, just Jonathan leaving his W-2 career to be full-time in multifamily, and for me transitioning to real estate development as well as a W-2 job. So those were, I think, it was a big trigger for us to transition from a hobby to a career and be able to help a lot of people through it.
Yeah, one of the guys that I partnered with a lot of my deals, he's made the point, the difference between a hobbyist in real estate and, when I was investing in single family, I was really a hobbyist. It was pick up a family and you pick up a property here, you pick up a property there. But if you want to scale and actually quit your job, you've got to turn it into a business. I think you guys you're well on your way. You got a lot of good traction, a lot of good stuff going on for you. So let's talk a little bit about your why. I mean, your motivation for doing this, and a couple levels deeper than why you like apartments, but what's your guys' big burning why?
I think it ties to what I was mentioning on our passion to progress in the career world. It wasn't just to, scale or make a lot of money or rise through the corporate ladder, but it was to really have an impact in our families and also in those, friends that we spend life with. And so for me, I am Colombian. I was born and raised in Colombia, and my parents, are immigrants to the U.S. And so the American dream was a big deal in my family. And I just realized that through the corporate world, I was not able to help my parents retire or help them achieve their goals. And in a way, although Jonathan's parents, story is very different. He also wanted to have an impact in his family. And we saw that through multifamily, we were able to grow and be able to provide a source for our family and friends to invest and be able to grow along with us.
Yeah, awesome. That's amazing. Jonathan, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, definitely everything that Paula said. It's funny, Brian, because, when you asked this question on the podcast, the first time that I had the opportunity to be on, it's really the first time I thought about it in detail. And some people, their why boils down to one specific thing. Mm-hmm. I think for me personally, there's a lot of different whys that kind of pool together, the financial freedom aspect of it, the ability to have a larger impact on the people we know, whether that's our friends, our family.
So let's talk about getting started in the industry. I mean, you've kind of alluded to it before, you kind of talked about it, but what were the biggest challenges that you guys had going from, W-2 in aerospace and development to get into multifamily investing?
Yeah, I think I would boil down them to kind of like three things. I might call them like the three M's, and those are momentum, mindset, and money. So when you start off in real estate, you have a huge learning curve, regardless of what specific asset class you're going after. You have a huge learning curve in coming up to speed. And so there's kind of building that momentum and knowing what to do, how to analyze deals, how to find deals, being able to do that. And so that was true when we first started. And it was especially true when we transitioned to the multifamily world. Mindset, perhaps the most important of the three, is another big one. When we started, we never even dreamed that we would be able to purchase an apartment building. And I think most multifamily investors have had a very similar experience of having to come to grips with the fact that it is an achievable goal. And then money, our very first investment, we saved for months and months and months to be able to purchase it. And most of the renovation on that residential property, we did ourselves, simply because that's what we were able to do and put in the sweat equity. And so you have to build the ability to purchase those properties. And so, in residential, that might look like sweat equity. And then as you move to the multifamily world, that probably looks like the ability to raise capital, syndicate, have good partnerships.
You have three really good points there. And I like how you brought them in as three different M's: momentum, mindset, and money. I like that, and agree wholeheartedly. It's very much a momentum game. And it's like pushing a huge stone up the hill. At first it's really hard to get it going, but eventually, you get it up to the top of the hill and it starts gaining speed by itself. But in mindset as well, it's something that I struggled with, 4 years ago. I could barely wrap my head around an 8 unit. Can I stretch so far that I can buy an 8 unit? And money is, I think that's a challenge that a lot of people have up front. It's a challenge that a lot of people don't know they're going to have until they start trying to raise capital. Paula, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think he covered it.
All right. So next question I want to ask is about your self-education. I know, Jonathan, you mentioned the Michael Blanc program, but What else did you guys do to learn the business?
I'm all about using free resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have exhausted or like build your foundations with free resources, then you can go ahead and start, investing financially into some of those more, I'll say, expensive resources. But for us, we started with podcasts. We started with listening to a lot of people that we respect and mentors that came up very organically through just going to meetups and getting to know people who will be willing to share their journey. But also just really reading books and podcasts really, really helped us to kind of build those strong foundations. And then from then on, really leveraging or not only your previous experience from corporate world, but also other people's experiences to propel us to be able to achieve what we needed to.
I love it. I think that's a path most people take. They go through the podcast, the free or the very, low hanging fruit, the less expensive resources up front. I did the same thing. I probably listened to, a few hundred hours worth of podcasts before I started spending money on, information. And, eventually I did a similar thing. I mean, I think Jonathan and I think we all met through the Michael Blanc network because we were all coaching students with him at one point.
Right.
Yeah. And I think like if you said like a timeline and a structure on your learning, that way you're not just like spending years just listening to the same podcast. But, if you say in the next 6 months, I'm going to cover this much information, then at that point, I'm going to decide if I'm going to go and pay for a mentorship, et cetera. I think that's a good approach.
I think one advantage to the education programs is they will often have things lined up in the right order. With podcasts, yes. I mean, doesn't matter how good the podcast is. It's, one day they talk about, item number 32 in the business. The next day they're going to talk about 18 and 2 days later, number 96. Right. So
yeah, you're right. And I actually took a, money raising course and I loved how organized it was. And it was just, that's how my brain works. So you're right. And I think that there is a lot of value in that structured and well-developed information. I think that's
the difference in my mind between the free content and the paid curated content. Plus plus the guides, if some of the content you get has somebody to guide you through it as well. And that's really the benefit of it.
I would say that, for example, like reading the book from Michael Blanc on multifamily, I think that if you're not willing to sit down and study the book, for example, paying a mentorship is not going to get you there. So I think it's a good weed out exercise, or like really understand, do I have the bandwidth and do I have the interest in this type of business? And so good foundational.
And I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit and say, paying a lot of money for the mentorship program actually helped me commit to a course of action.
Yes. 100%.
Very true.
I read Michael Blanc's book. I read a couple other books. I've got several books on that bookshelf behind me that you can't see because of my, virtual background, but I read all of them and I had listened to like hundreds of hours of podcasts. But when it came time to write that $25,000 check to Michael Blanc, that really is what I think helped me to commit. If it was a $2,000 check, I probably could have, written a $2,000 check and walked away and been like, it'd be nice to have $2,000. 25, that was enough money at the time that it was a big decision and it helped me commit. So there's definite value to that as well. It was a committal process. Can you do that without, a $25,000 check? Yes. Can you get the information without joining a program? Yes, but I think there's a lot of benefit to it. So let's talk about the deal specific stuff. So I know you guys, came in as co-GPs on a property in Oklahoma. I want to say Tulsa, right?
Correct.
And then you guys did a JV deal. And then you guys were lead sponsor on one in College Station. So we're going to talk today about that lead sponsor in College Station. So tell us just broad brushstroke overview of the deal. And after that, I definitely want to start talking team. So let's talk deal first and then team.
Sure. I can kind of give the overview of the deal. So as you already mentioned, it's a 75 unit A-class townhome style property in College Station, Texas. It's located about a half mile from the edge of the university campus. And it came to us as an off-market deal through a broker relationship that I had. And essentially this broker had very little interest in the College Station market or knowledge of it, but stumbled due to a relationship he had with the seller, stumbled across the property and thought of us because Paul and I both went to Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Hey, I've got a great deal for you. Would you like to look at it?" And as soon as he said, "Hey, 2012 A class," I thought, this isn't going to work because, anyone knows in this market today, you can't even get a B class to pencil out, more or less an A class, right? Yeah. But, I, like everyone, believe you got to do the reps if you're going to find a deal. And so I underwrote it and was surprised that it wasn't as far off as what I thought it would be. And so I messaged him back and said, "Hey, actually, I can't quite hit this price, but I could hit this price." Mm-hmm. And didn't expect to hear back from him. But, a week later, he came back and said, "Well, you may actually be in striking range." And so long story short, we wound up getting the deal. And I think honestly, Brian, I think the biggest reason that it didn't get snatched up is because a lot of other folks who might have had the opportunity to look at it just overlooked it because it was an A class and because it was new and didn't have rehab value add. Mm-hmm. But when I took time to study the deal, I realized that it was owned by a mom and pop owner. Mm-hmm. And, great people, but, trying to do everything themselves. Didn't have a website for the property, didn't market the property. The property's 100% occupied at well below market rents. And so literally we developed a business plan that consisted of going in, putting in a professional property management company, building out a website and marketing plan, and bringing the units both through renewals and new leases up to market rent. And so we put very little CapEx into the property, and we're hitting above even what we thought the market rents were right off the bat. So it's been a great project.
Yeah. Now, something else, how big is the College Station area?
It's a little over 250,000 people. Okay. So, it's Bryan and College Station, two towns lumped together. College Station's obviously the university town. Bryan's the normal town. And so it's about 250,000 with about 60,000 of that being students.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be something that may have kept other people from it. I mean, Houston's a big market. Dallas is a big market. Austin's a big market. And College Station is like right in the center of that triangle, but it's far enough away from each one. And I'm curious if a lot of people overlooked it because, College Station, I don't think anybody realizes anything is there besides Texas A&M, right?
That's right. And so I think that we had that opportunity to bring our knowledge of the market. We both lived there for many years and still know a lot of people who live there. And we did a lot of research because we didn't want to be biased, right? We didn't want to say like, we love the town, so we have to buy the deal there. And so we did a lot of research on the market, the population growth, employment. They're bringing a lot of businesses into the school. And then the endowment of Texas A&M is like higher than Yale's. Or at par. And so our school, it's not going anywhere. And there's a lot of people that continue to support the school, which brings a lot of safety into the town, as well as attracts a lot of, companies to come for, to hire students and different things like that. So we did a lot of research to make sure that it was a town that was sound. And then also visiting it, like, my sister went to A&M even after we did. And so we kept going to the town even afterward, and it just continues to grow and is extremely well kept. So it's a hidden gem, and I will say.
Yeah. And then there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out. I mean, you guys had the competitive advantage because you both lived there for some time. You knew the area extremely well. And, it's probably someplace that you guys are just fine going back to. And I think those two things are really big in selecting a market. I mean, you obviously have to do research on the market like you guys did as well. But those are a couple of things in my mind that, maybe they're a little further down the list than the market research, but I think those are also important factors as well. If you have to, I've got to go to that property again, that's not a good situation. But I mean, College Station, it's like, hey, there's an A&M football game next week. Let's go visit our property.
Yeah.
But tax write-off too. So as long as you visit the property. But anyway, yeah. So let's talk about the team now. Real estate is a team sport. Who else came in with you on this project? And I think more importantly, how did you meet those guys?
I like that you asked this question, Brian, because, one of the, I guess, misnomers I had about multifamily when we first started, even when we signed up for the mentorship, is that we were going to be basically everything on the deal. We were going to raise the money, find the deal, manage the deal. And if you really want to buy a large multifamily, unless you just happen to have a lot of money, you need a team.
Yep.
I don't think I will ever do a deal without partners, because I value the additional skill sets. And obviously I have a built-in partner with Paula, but then even partners beyond her, I value the additional skill sets, the different perspectives, and the accountability that comes with partnerships. And so our team, as far as the other GPs, consisted of a KP, who's a gentleman that we had met early on in our investing career before we were even in multifamily. And he's actually one of the first people that we went and had dinner with to discuss multifamily investing, because he had done a few deals and we just said, hey, how did you do this? And so, it was really cool because we've been trying to do a deal with him for a long time, but just hadn't worked out. And so, kind of came full circle, and he was essentially our KP, if you will, on this deal.
Now, just real quick, I'm going to explain KP.
Sure.
The key principle is the person who comes in and helps you qualify for a loan. In most cases, there are other things they can do, but to get a commercial loan, you have to have somebody with a significant net worth, and you have to have somebody with a lot of experience on the team. So that's essentially what KPs come in and provide. So go ahead and keep going from there.
Oh, absolutely. And so, and one of the cool things about him is that he's a very active KP. He's a GP and a KP, if you will. And I really liked that. Beyond that, we had a couple other co-GPs who helped us raise equity for the deal and provide other value to the deal, assisting with asset management and stuff. And they were individuals who we'd worked with before on previous projects. And so we had them join the project as well. I think my big thing on looking for potential partners, or the advice I would give building a team, is that you want to make sure first that the person has integrity. That's the most important thing. I've seen too many things lately where, partnerships that fall apart and stuff because of a lack of integrity. And so you really want to make sure that you know the person well, and that takes time. I think the second thing is competency. Are they able to do whatever it is that you're pulling them into the team? If they need to raise money, are they able to raise money? If they need to manage, are they able to manage? And I think final thing that some people overlook is, do you like working with them? Do you like the person? You're stuck with these people for, say 3 to 6 years, depending on your business plan. And so do you enjoy talking to them on a weekly basis? So that's kind of the high level of how we put our team together.
Yep. Awesome. Great overview. And I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. You really need a team put together for that stuff. And there's lots of good reasons to like the people that you work with. That's very important. I've talked with a lot of people recently. I'm in a spot where I can KP on deals right now, which is a lot of fun actually. But I have a lot of objective criteria, but my one big glaring subjective thing is I got to like you. And that's, you can't put numbers behind that. You can't evaluate that. It's just like, I either like you or, so yeah, or I don't, but anyway, good overview on that one. So let's talk about the capital raising. And I think, Paula, you said you're going to take that one.
I think that, this is something that you may not be able to educate yourself in, but part of it is like, you have to learn as you do it. And to be honest, that was a skill that I did not know I had until I was put in the position of, okay, we have a deal. How are we going to do that? Or we're looking for a deal. How do we raise, funds for it? And I did take a couple of courses about it. And I think that the piece that really helped us on this deal was long-term relationships. It was the most rewarding part, I feel like, of being in real estate and multifamily syndications, approach, is that I get to go and talk with, friends and previous coworkers and previous leaders and previous mentors that look at me and said, 100%, I trust you. I believe in you. I want to invest with you because I've seen your track record, because I've seen, the quality of work that you deliver. And for me, that has been very rewarding and really eye-opening. And so that has been a really, really great experience. And obviously, at times it's a little stressful because, you have a set number that you have to raise and there's a closing date. But I think that God has been really faithful and has opened that opportunity to, it's more of me giving them an opportunity for them to invest in something that's going to, help them and bless them long term versus the opposite of me earning or gaining something through that process. And so raising capital for this deal was awesome. And it was a really great experience. Mm-hmm. Obviously partnering as well and having people that are raising along with us so that you're not, maybe buying too much and are prepared for closing.
Yeah. What was the overall capital raise on this project?
Jonathan, can you remind me?
2.7.
Oh, 2.7.
Okay, 2.7 million. Yeah, that's a nice chunk of change to try to be raising. Now, I don't think we've mentioned this earlier. What was the total purchase price?
8.6.
Okay. All right. So I am going to throw a little curveball. This wasn't in what I sent you out earlier, but I'm sure you guys can take this. What type of loan did you get on this property?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We used a CMBS lender out of California.
Okay.
I won't mention the name, but we found them through a broker. I decided on this deal early on, I wanted to use a mortgage broker to select a loan with the specific terms that I was looking for, which was, of course, certain LTV. The lending environment the last couple of years has been very friendly towards bridge loans where you need a lot of CapEx. And this property was not that. Mm-hmm. We didn't need a lot of CapEx. And so I was really trying to find a lender that could work with the specific property in terms that we're looking for. Overall, I think we as a team did very well working with them, provided them what they need, got it across the finish line. There were definitely some challenges along the way, specifically working with a mortgage broker and not directly with a lender where I had, initially direct communication with them. Yeah. And so some of that miscommunication created some challenges, but ultimately we got the terms we were looking for and got across the finish line.
Yeah. And there's pros and cons, and I got a love-hate relationship with brokers in general. Brokers are always the middleman, and sometimes they help you, sometimes they get in the way, in my opinion. But in this case, if you had specific terms and you weren't sure where to go, I think that's exactly when you need a broker. You leverage their Rolodex. A broker does business because they know many different people, many different products, many different vendors. And when you come to them, they can point you to the right one, make that and connect the dots for you. But I think you hit the nail on the head with them as well. A lot of time the broker stays in the middle, and that's exactly what the word broker is, but they broker the deal. And sometimes that leads to miscommunications, but I go back and forth on that one. We've used the lending brokers before, and we've had several deals where we've gone straight to banks as well. And pros and cons to both directions. So
absolutely.
So good on that one. All right. So let's talk about getting to the closing table. And were there any big snags along the way?
I think that it's worth mentioning that when we were awarded the deal, we were in Europe. And so we were finally taking a break from work, and we were vacationing, and then we were awarded the deal. And so you never know when the deal is going to come. And so obviously we were like, yes, of course, we're going to take it and we're going to work through our vacation. And so we balanced that. And there was, a lot of decisions that needed to be made through the conversation. I'll let Jonathan kind of fill in those details, but I would say that it was not easy. It was just, the timing is never going to be perfect, but it worked out well for us.
And you guys just got back from Europe too, right?
Yes, that's correct. We went to Scandinavia.
So fun fact, I got my first deal under contract from Bogota, Colombia.
Oh, yes.
I know.
I love
I'm not
it.
joking either. It was from Bogota, Colombia. And I remember
It's because you were in the right place.
I was in the right place.
I may
love
be a little
Colombia, by the
biased.
way. Yeah, Colombia is awesome. Now, you said you were from Colombia. Are you from Bogota?
I'm not.
Okay, but it's still
That's
Colombia.
okay. It's Colombia.
That's okay. But I mean, the whole country's cool, But
Yeah, exactly.
So, Jonathan, your wife said you were going to fill in some gaps there. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was kind of two different challenges getting it to the closing table. The first is just, especially going through this process the first time as a lead syndicator. We'd gone through, I had done a JV deal, I knew the basics, all that. We'd gone through his co-GP. So we weren't like ignorant or uneducated. But when you walk through the first time, there are some challenges. And so, while in Europe, with challenging phone service, et cetera, lining up our KP, lining up the lending environment, because one thing on this deal is we had to put 1% hard earnest money day one when we signed the PSA. Yeah. And so you need to have every duck in a row before you put your name on that line, and making sure we had a property manager that agreed to our budget and our pro forma rents, making sure we had the KP in line, making sure we had lending terms that were satisfactory. Those were all big things that we had to initially sort out. Yeah. Once we had those, it went pretty smooth for quite a while. DD was a breeze. Everything was in great shape.
It's an A-class property built in the last 10 years. It should
exactly.
be.
Exactly.
And we got to meet the owners, which was something unique. Right before we left to Europe, we went and visited, and we got to meet them. And so that was such a great opportunity to build that personal rapport and hear their story and become, you don't get to become friends right away on one meeting, but I think that we really created a good impression with them. And so they were very easy to work with in a way. They were very open and being willing for us to, walk through the property and ask questions and provide us with all the information, very transparent. So that helped our closing and our hard money decision.
I love that. Now, I will say that, several years ago, 3-4 years ago, it was common you put your earnest money in, and it's 1% of the deal typically, but it doesn't go hard till the end of due diligence period. At that time, I didn't mind putting a contract in on a property that I wasn't 100% sure on, because you had 30 days of due diligence to figure it out. But now when hard money comes in day one and you have either half or all of your earnest money deposit that's non-refundable, I think it's forcing a lot of operators to make sure their I's are dotted, T's are crossed before going in. And you got to be sure that you've done your homework first before putting that offer on the table. But looks like you guys did that from halfway across the world and made it work out. All right, so let's talk about the property after closing and how it's gone since.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit maybe more to this particular section, just because I do a lot of the asset management on the particular project. So right after we closed, overall things went well. We got a good cadence going with our property manager, started rolling with our business plan. But because everyone wants to hear about the challenges, I'll talk about a couple of challenges that we had. So one challenge we had right off the bat is our fire system. We knew that we had a couple things on it that were going to need to be replaced, but after going in, several other things continued to break on the fire system, even though it's a new property. Yeah. And, that created a lot of, unanticipated CapEx up front that we had to spend to get that system in compliance with the city. And so
cheap either.
No, it's not. And fortunately, we had, even though this wasn't a high CapEx project, we did have CapEx funds and healthy reserves and were able to take care of it. But, of all the things that you might think about going into a property that you're going to have to spend money on, replacing a few $1,000s worth of fire stuff is maybe not what you expect. So I guess my point is be ready for things like that with your reserves and your contingency going in. A second thing that I wasn't prepared for, that we did not know from the owners after doing DD and everything, is that there had been a series of vehicle break-ins on the property. So you have to understand, this is a great area of College Station. It's not by any means a rundown area or any kind of problems like that. But, a couple of weeks after we closed, my property manager calls me and says, "Hey, we've had a break-in on a vehicle on the property. And tenants have said that there's been a couple more. You've before we closed.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, what are we going to do? And so we immediately devised a plan to update the lighting on the property to some new LED lighting that was going to make it much brighter at night. We redid the whole gate code configurations and, re-messaged the tenants to make sure that only they had the codes for the property. And then we engaged the police department there. And fortunately, another week after that, when the culprits tried to attempt another break-in, the police department was able to apprehend them. But it's just, once again, on an A-class property in a great area, it was a challenge that we weren't expecting. Yeah. But, honestly, I think with both of these, it's something that I'm proud of, that, we were able to come in and bring value to the tenants by giving them a safer place to live. Both through the fire and through that. And, we've added a lot of other amenities and stuff to the property as well. And that's part of running the business. But, any listeners that are looking to go into asset management, these are some of the unanticipated type of challenges that you could face on a property.
Yeah. And it's also a good reason why you always have a little slush fund in your CapEx budget. One thing I'm just going to double down on that you said is your tenants see what you do. Okay. So if you are responsive, a couple of car breaks in, you add lighting, they're going to see that. And they're going to understand that you guys are trying to make the place better. You're responsive. It doesn't immediately translate to dollars and cents, but it does translate to dollars and cents. You're going to instill a sense of community there. They're going to want to take care of the place a lot better. And you're going to end up with a higher renewal rate, which saves you money in the long run because you don't have the churn costs and you don't have the vacancies and everything else. So being able to be responsive to stuff like that is absolutely crucial in this business. All right. So we're coming towards the final stretch. Couple of questions for you guys. First one, what's next?
I can try to answer that question, but I'll let Jonathan complement it. I think that we are actively looking for opportunities and continuing to grow our portfolio of multifamily. As you guys are aware, it's very competitive out there. So I think that one thing that me and Jonathan always come to agreement is, yes, we're going to underwrite a lot of deals and we're going to put a lot of LOIs, but we're never going to make a bad deal. And so I'm not saying to never make a bad deal, but we're never going to make a poor choice or just to get a deal done. And so we are very disciplined on that. And so what's next is to continue to grow our portfolio and provide opportunities to our investors to invest. And so we have a few projects in the pipeline for that. And are looking forward to continue to grow that.
I really enjoy the deal finding aspect of the multifamily business. So I spend a lot of time looking at deals, talking to brokers, putting in offers like Paula mentioned. I would say the level that we're at right now, it's hard to keep a consistent deal flow to always have a deal for our investors. And so we also are taking advantage of co-GP opportunities still and, helping other partners that have helped us and bringing value to them. And then that also provides our investors with consistent deal flow. And I'm actively looking for deals. And that's really, I think, the part I enjoy doing the most, although I enjoy all the business. So yeah, continuing to find deals, bring value to our investors, bring value to our partners.
Here comes the most important question of the entire podcast. So if you get, like I said earlier, you got to nail this one. So no pressure at all, What advice would you give an aspiring investor who's about a year behind you?
That's a tough thing. Obviously, there's a lot of advice kind of sprinkled in this whole conversation, but to boil it down to one thing, I think it's kind of eat the elephant in bite-sized pieces. So, when you're starting out in multifamily, at least for me, it seemed very intimidating. It seemed like a very far goal and maybe something that we were never even going to accomplish. Mm-hmm. But when you break it down into the components and then just kind of tackle them one at a time, it suddenly becomes a very doable goal over time. So what do you need to get your first deal done? Well, you need a deal. Mm-hmm. You need investors. You probably need some amount of personal money. And so break each one of those items down that you need. If you need a deal, start talking to brokers or look for a partner who can source a deal that you can co-GP on. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for investors, build a sample deal package and start talking to a couple a week, break it down into very small bites and just be consistent with tackling those. And then over time, you'll build on your achievements to the point where you have that first deal done. So that would be my advice.
Love it. Anything to add, Paula?
Yeah, I think for me, like the biggest lesson has been limited beliefs, which was in a way fought by creating more smaller bites. And so I would just say, like, really believe in yourself and believe that you're able to, if you put enough work and you put enough, effort, like there is really it's not impossible for you to accomplish what you said.
Love it. Priceless advice. And then last question, how can listeners learn more about you guys?
Yeah. So our business name, Paula and I are co-founders of Apogee Capital, our multifamily investing business. And so we have a website, which is www.apogeemfc.com. And so you can go there and learn a little bit more about us and see maybe some of the podcasts we've been on. We have a free ebook, all that stuff. I personally am very active on LinkedIn. And so feel free to reach out to me there. Would love to talk to anyone who's interested in getting to multifamily, whether that be, active or maybe you want to passively invest. Just reach out and happy to chat.
Love it. Thanks a lot. And Apogee Capital, I mean, you're an aerospace engineer, so makes a lot of sense, right?
You're probably one of the first people that got that without an explanation, Brian. So that just means you're a smart cookie.
No, my son's favorite game is Kerbal Space Program. So anyway, it's something he aspires to be an aerospace engineer one day. He wants to put rockets on the moon. But anyway, that's fun. But anyway, thanks for coming on the podcast today. Very much appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us, Brian. It's been awesome.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans, yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.